Welcome to Joanna the Medium Show, broadcast on Ever Beyond Radio and through the Wolf Spirit Media Network, helping you transform from fear to freedom and reminding you of your true power. During this broadcast, we will discuss anything and everything connecting to owning your inner power and the essence of your spirit. We will hear inspiring stories from guests, as well as guidance from the spirit world. Jump on board for this incredible ride. Here's your host, Joanna. Go ahead.
Hello everybody. Thank you so much for coming back. And for those of you who are new, welcome. And I hope you find something interesting here. Tonight, another night with a wonderful guest of mine, and I'm not going to keep you in suspense. My guest's name today is TL, or Tarot Lumination for a longer version. And TL, I know TL through YouTube. I have been listening to his predictions, to his readings for the last few months, and he really spiked my interest because the way he delivers messages is very different. He feels like he's a storyteller. So Spirit has been kind of nagging on me to bring him along, and I finally realized I had this space. Let's do this. And he graciously agreed to do so. I had to pull a little bit of strings, but, few things about TL. I'm not going to say too much. I'm going to let him tell you about him, but you can also visit him on YouTube at Tarot Lumination is his channel, and I'll ask him to tell you what the channel is if I'm incorrect. And also his website is tarotlumination.com. So without further ado, I'm just going to bring my beautiful guest. Hello, TL. How are you?
Good evening, Joanna. How are you? Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here. I have three pages of questions here. I'm not sure which one I'm going to get first. We may not get to all of them, but as the conversation ensues, I know that my guide is going to ask me to ask certain things. So, is your YouTube channel, Tarot Lumination, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Joanna.
That is correct. Okay. So let me just start with a few questions and we'll just go from there. Okay. The one thing I just wanted to get right off the bat, because people always call people different things. What do you call yourself? A psychic, a medium, a healer, all of the above? You don't care? You don't have a label? What do you normally refer to yourself as?
In my head, without speaking to anyone else, I would say primarily a healer.
A healer. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. So, let's just stick with the healer. I actually like the word healer. I personally, I don't know why, abhor being called a psychic. I guess because it paints us with a certain brush that isn't, that is based in, the old ways. So I actually don't really care for the word psychic. At the end of the day, we're all psychic anyways. But so now that we have you as a healer, what are your gifts? Everybody has different gifts. What are your gifts?
Well, I'm still discovering my gifts. What's happened is I've discovered that I have an extreme high degree of empathy, and basically I don't know what other word to use, but you used it already, psychic awareness. Some people call it high sensory perception, and it's typically what you would expect to hear from someone in our field. Where you're very sensitive to the energies around people and environments to the point where you can see, hear, feel, and touch. Basically things like clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, things like that.
Perfect, because my next question was going to be, in your opinion, in your words, what is an empath, and you already described it. So thank you so much, because I find some people ask what an empath is. Okay, so you mentioned hear and see. What do you hear and see?
Typically, it goes through a filtering process over which I don't really have control except in terms of management. Typically, most of what I see visually is my companionship in terms of angels.
Okay.
Also, I sometimes I hear things in terms of like vocalizations of what angels would want to communicate in my direction. Basically, like you would call them your guides, for example. Depends on how, or if you want to take it down to a simpler understanding, just call it your intuition. But this is, frankly, a lot more vivid and a lot more specific, and up to the point where it's literally like having someone in the room with you.
So it's actually a separate being outside of you and your intuition that you're working with, and there's several. You have
there's teams. There's teams, and then there's in simple terms, if I was drawing a diagram, typically I would look upwards. Sometimes it's at the same level, literally just like having someone in the room. But typically I work with a team of female, where they would be called female if they were here on Earth, and a team of male. And they're all very deeply coordinated between themselves, and they are very little different. There's almost no difference between them and regular people, except that they don't have a physical substance, and also that they do have a very high, extreme high levels of compassion, because that's really all they are. That's all they do. They are just literally radiating the healing power of love, and I just happen to have a good relationship.
And when did you find out you can communicate with these beings?
Well, I think it was mostly when they started communicating with me, and I didn't really understand it. I think what happened initially is that they, let's say, nudged me into situations and circumstances where I became shockingly aware of what lies beyond the veil in terms of what you can perceive, and also in terms of the timing, because a lot of people with what's so-called psychic faculties and experiences often dealing with the people who've passed over. But in my experience, I'm dealing with the past, the present, and the future. I relate very much in the present moment, and I can also work towards what we call the future and also what we call the past, also beyond the veil.
So was it at a certain age where you became fully aware? The reason why I'm asking is because I have no recollection of any memories of having spirit in my younger life. I was completely I don't know if I was disconnected, but I was certainly not aware. Yet I know that most healers that I know of, they've had ghosts dancing on their bed, and they've had people by their side of their bed. I've never had anything like that. So I'm always very interested as to when gifts actually materialize themselves to a person. And I know we grow over time. So was there a specific age with you, or time in your life?
Well, I would say when I was about 8, or maybe up to 11 years old, I was very aware of a presence, but I wouldn't be able to define it the way I've defined it today as an adult. And the only reason I'm being specific about that age range is because it's very much to do with the practice of self-healing and how to endure, let's say, arduous situations or circumstances or events in such a way that it would be almost impossible to endure without angelic, let's say, intervention. So I became very aware that there is something out there, and it's very, very close to us all the time. But you know, the more tangible descriptions where I could actually describe what they look like really didn't come into being until let's just say adulthood. Adulthood, yeah. Yeah, and then it just became more and more refined and more vivid, and to the point where it's overwhelming. And then it becomes a problem because you have to go through, if you're a psychic like yourself, for example, you have to go through these layers of initiation where essentially you're being tested to how much can you handle.
You mean ripped apart, right?
Yeah, basically, because the energy can be so disorienting, and you have to find a way to be able to stabilize through these massive vortices of energy that would normally send someone into a loony bin. And then you have to be able to endure that and come out the other side and be able to function as though nothing happened. And so
still intact.
You have to be able to do that. And generate what I think of as a practice. What comes down to a practice.
So that was one of the questions that I had. But before I go to that question, and it's only at your comfort zone, you mentioned the age of 8, and you also insinuated that there might have been something that have transpired that eventually made you realize you had outside help because you needed assistance. Was there anything specific around that time that you feel comfortable discussing where you became aware that you actually have help outside of the norm around you?
Yes, but we're moving more into the world of teenagers at this point.
Gotcha.
Because because everything became radically amplified when I became a teenager, because I was constantly encountering trauma upon trauma, and I either witnessing this or being on the receiving end in such a way that it became very disturbing. And I would say a lot of people would understand this if they've endured any kind of trauma. The physical body goes through what I think some people call like a dissociative condition, where your body dissociates, your soul dissociates from your body.
Yes.
As a survival mechanism, because the trauma becomes too overwhelming.
Too much. Yeah.
And it's very common when people are close to death, or they've endured a very shocking violation of some kind, or a major accident, something like that, where the soul basically dissociates from the body.
Self-preservation is what I'm hearing. Self-preservation.
Yeah, it is a form of self-preservation.
Self-preservation.
And so that the soul remains intact, and the body just does what it does. But I was very lucky to be able to keep coming back into the physical form, because I ended up, over the years, it started to be like, it just became a pattern where I was always encountering basically trauma or near-death situations where I was either dying or left for dead, and then having to find a way to come back, and then witnessing these things in other people. And so it becomes a bit disorienting, because I'm not a doctor. I did go to school to be a doctor, but I was miserable as a student. I was really incompetent. And so here we are.
This is just totally what came to me, and all of a sudden I'm veering to questions I haven't been prepared for that I'm hearing my guide to ask. And one of the things that I'm hearing is, and it may be true for you, but one of the things that I'm hearing is that had you gone through the medical school process, you would have had to devoid yourself of everything that you believe.
Oh yeah, I
that
can see now. I wouldn't have had a chance, because the traditional medical training is so consuming and demands a lot of, let's say, energy in a direction where I was really not very functional. And so I realized that after all best attempts and best intentions, this wasn't work. So it was very kind of crushing for me, and I just sort of ended up delving into the things that made sense to me, like art and music and writing. But the background theme was always the energy of love and healing, in terms of how people need love and healing in their lives. And I essentially, very, very slowly, through many, many, many events, realized that it's really, I'm really just functioning as an instrument. And you can't learn these things through any kind of traditional training.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's, there are a couple of schools out there where people can get certified as a psychic medium, which is fine, but there's only a couple places that I would ever trust or recommend to anyone, and I'm not going there myself. And I've had to learn the hard way.
And even with that, I mean, this is what I believe. One of the explanations that my guide gave me when I asked about everybody being a psychic, he said it's kind of like everybody can learn how to play piano, but not everybody will become a pianist. So although everybody will have the skill to some extent. Not everybody is meant to use that gift at, on a huge scale. So that makes perfect sense. And I just feel that if you went to the traditional way, all the energy that you are basically channeling through the vehicle, which is your body, you would have had to kind of hang that on a hanger for quite some time, and that maybe wouldn't have served you. Which what you've said without even me asking the question, because one of the questions I was going to ask is, obviously you must have had some tremendous turmoil in your life in order to do what you do, because I have yet met a person who does healing on the level that you do that has unscathed or escaped, traumas in their life. It just simply doesn't happen. Hence the phrase wounded healer. So just by feeling your energy and the little things that you're saying, I can clearly see why you do what you do. So having said that, and we talked about this before, and sometimes I'll ask questions where sometimes I ask myself questions I haven't realized the answer yet. But what is the purpose of your gift?
I think ultimately the purpose of the gift is to be an effective instrument, or what was the word? There's a word for it, like a conductor.
Conduit?
A conduit, yeah, perfect word. A conduit for the healing power of love. Mm-hmm. It's just literally like it's a phenomenon. It's literally just like water out of a faucet. The healing power of love is literally an energy, and it has to be conducted. And it's not a tangible phenomenon, and that's where it gets very tricky, because we're taking all of the world of healing, traditional healing, and turning it upside down. And the reality is, on my little channel, what started to happen is almost, 30% of the private clients are professional healers, very advanced professional healers who are wigging out, coming unglued in their practice, and they need some perspective. And so I really enjoyed being there for them, the other healers, so to speak. I mean, there's lots of folks who just want healing. Right. And it's sort of healing that you can't get from a doctor or a psychiatrist or your best friend or a pill or self-medicating, and people end up with nowhere left to go. And they end up at places like Terra Lumination.
Now, Terra Lumination, from what I understand when you and I talked, it's a fairly new entity. Like, you haven't been at Terra Lumination for years, have you?
No. It's very new. And
so what prompted you to, or who pushed you, should I say, to put yourself out there, kind of, sort of?
My angels.
What was that about?
My angels, it was very, very personal.
Yes.
And I was walking down the street one day, and I'm quite, comfortable in this world, because I worked as a professional psychic medium and a consultant for people in that world, and in showbiz as well, professional psychics. So when they come unglued, they sometimes need help. But I didn't want to get into it because it's such an extreme way of it's just a very, very rarefied, let's say, marketplace. And I was trying to avoid it because it's so overwhelming to be on the receiving end of some people's energy sometime. But nevertheless, I was walking down the street, and my angels gave me an extremely powerful nudge, and they said, okay, it's time. Get in there. And they pushed, literally, it was like feeling like I was getting pushed into this store where they were holding a little seminar evening about psychic mediums. And I thought, oh no, please, no, I don't, no. But anyway, I went in and I kind of played along with it, and I gave some psychic readings to a couple of the people in there, and it was very freaky weird for them, and kind of shocking. And I thought, okay, oh gosh, this isn't going to go away. So after the event, I left, and I got this big fat cuddle from my angels. I know this sounds really wussy, but that's how it is over here. And they said, okay, well, this is where you need to go. And the next thing they said is, you need to look into the world of tarot. And I thought, what? I don't, please, no, please.
That sounds familiar.
And then it's just like, well, just leave me alone. Why can't I just do something normal and ordinary? And then they said, okay, so I started getting back into tarot and the astrology, which I've always played with anyway. But they said, okay, it's time, baby. You got to go public. And I went, oh, no. Are you telling me I got to do what I think you're telling me to do? And that was March of 2017. So that's 9 months ago. Yeah, then I started and I haven't looked back. And it's still a very tiny channel. It's still very new. But I'm learning a lot. And I'm discovering that it's really not a tarot channel at all.
No, it's under the umbrella of tarot, but it's basically to bring people in to spread your message. Now, you said something, we talked before, and you know how I catch certain words and phrases, and I then latch onto them for more meaning. You essentially said, and please correct me if I misunderstood, but what I heard you say is that your job, if you will, is to essentially spread the message of healing through love, that one can heal through the aspect of love. That's what I heard you say, right?
Ultimately, yes. That is probably the core message, core energy field behind tarot lumination.
Now, I also know that you cannot teach something you don't understand yourself.
Okay.
Which tells me you have to go through some pretty tough times in order to now do what you do.
Major poop. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, you could say that. In other words, it's like learning about anything and everything that is not love. I know a lot about what does not work. Let's put it that way. And in terms of the human body, a lot of times you know that in very, very unambiguous ways that you could call pain and suffering to the point of death. And then repeat until you finally get it. Aha. Wow, this is really heavy duty stuff, man. And people, you could say I've endured, and you'd never know because I'm a fairly jolly, ordinary looking person. And, I look completely harmless and I've really just, there's no issues here, but most of the stuff that I've had to endure was internal, or let's just say, there was a lot of physical trauma, but the other kind of traumas are the traumas that are much harder to handle sometimes, that you would say might be to do with psychological, emotional issues, which can be devastating. And there's no pill that can heal things like a betrayal in a relationship. And, you can do your counseling, you can get your therapy and all of that, but ultimately you have to go to the soul level. Yes. And you have to literally pour love on this situation like it's an ointment, it's something like you would water a plant with a watering can, like sprinkles and things, and it has to be very, 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 very carefully administered because you can't put too much on it. It's just like regular medicine. If you can't force love and healing onto somebody, they have to be ready, willing, and able to receive and to accept. And then you start getting into the issues. Well, do they feel worthy? Do they feel deserving?
Yes.
Are they open to receive?
Yes.
And that's where you start getting into the real goop, and then you discover the real depth of the wounding and the real depth of the pain and how much love needs to be administered in very gentle, careful doses. You just can't say, oh, yeah, just watch this video or do this chant and listen to this song 3 times and then pat your head 5 times and do a couple of yoga moves and meditate and you'll be fine. Thank you. Next. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. One cannot be a passive receiver. One has to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Willing participant, right?
Absolutely. That is the fundamental key. Yeah.
But you just hit on something that I'm finding out. I mean, I've been doing therapy for many, many years, And this kind of way came out a few years ago. But like even with me, the fundamental challenge with so many people that I face, and I'm sure you do too, because that's what you will attract based on what you're here to do, that people are not even aware that they do not know how to receive. It's so subconsciously driven. They have no awareness.
Well, that's the big tragedy. That's where the real tragedy lies, is because pain is pain. It doesn't matter whether you've been brutalized or whether you just had one minor incident. It's very subjective, and what might trigger devastating suicidal pain to one person could be just like, oh, that was just nothing, man, to someone else, because it's a question of degree and who you are as a person. Mm-hmm. But you can't really judge someone like that. Just say like, oh, they just dumped you. Oh, well, suck it up. You can't do that. Because if someone's really, really feeling ultimate devastating suicidal pain from a betrayal, that's real. That's real for them. Mm-hmm. And you have to treat that way. You can't judge them. And then you have, from there, it's once a relationship is being established between Tarot Lumination and a client, what tends to happen is there's very like a gentle peeling off of layers, like, you would say removing the bandages, in order to find out what is the nature of the wound, where is the wound, and are we willing to actually reveal it to heal it? Mm-hmm. These are core themes of Tarot Illumination. We have to be willing to reveal it to heal it. Mm-hmm. And then it always ends up back in a feedback loop. Are you willing? Are you ready? Yes. Are you able to receive the love that you deserve? And then it becomes shocking when people realize that they've never been trained or coached or learned how to love themselves, which would be fundamental to someone who has learned how to love themselves. Mm-hmm. It's easy to receive love, and they also can enjoy the giving of love. But in general, I don't know why this is, but a lot of people are scared because the receiving of true love, it can be absolutely shocking because it can be so unknown. It's such an unknown phenomenon that
and overwhelming.
It's too overwhelming for somebody, and they'd rather be in a relationship where they're getting beat up and devastated because at least they know the parameters. And then when they look for healing and they slowly discover layer by layer that, wait a minute, it's not what I thought it was, then they ultimately have to face themselves and their own participation in the equation of pain that's happening in their life. And it can be very, very hard to navigate in that world without a very sympathetic, understanding relationship between patient and client.
Correct. It's almost like the image I'm being shown that speaks to what you just said is like having a broken leg and hopping on one versus having a cane. That cane keeps you stable.
Yeah.
And even though it's not your own leg for the time being until your leg gets better, that allows you to stay a little bit more balanced. So you're the other column to allow them to be that balance so they don't, go cockeyed. Yeah. So you touched on something really important here because you said at the beginning, it's not about tarot at all. You just use tarot as, so this is an interesting question because I talk about this on my videos all the time. I've never learned how to read tarot. I'm just now starting to recognize some signs, but it ain't my gift. I mean, if I had to depend on reading tarot cards, I wouldn't be doing this. So my information comes mostly from my guide and some from tarot. How do you use tarot?
The tarot for me triggers. It's like it's a triggering process. Got it. And like almost everything in my life, I've failed on the academic approach, and I've gone through courses and training and all these things. But in the end, I just had to tune into my own understanding. And so what tends to happen is that the tarot starts to tell a story in itself, and the tarot is almost like almost like a prop, as if you're going into, like if we were doing this face-to-face, if I actually gave and offered private readings face-to-face, then the tarot is very, very much a prop that provides a sense of comfort to the client, because the reality of what's happening on my side of it is that it really turns into a very, very gently and orderly, structured psychic phenomenon, where. But the thing is, like you were talking about for yourself, the process and the labeling of psychic can be misunderstood, and it actually makes it much more simple and much more comfortable to relate with a client through the tarot. Because I used to work as a psychic medium, and I don't need astrology, I don't need the tarot, I don't need anything, and it can be very disorienting for the provider because there's nothing to hold on to. Okay, you might.
So someone like a grounding, right? Yeah. Someone like it's grounding. Yes, yeah.
So, like, because you have your own practice and you work with clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience, which is very much the classic formats for psychic communication, and it's really no different over here at Tarot Lumination. Because it's not an academic reading. The readings are not done by the book. The cards speak for themselves, and these cards end up telling a story, which is often like a very, very gentle form of showing the person a reflection of themselves that they've never seen or seen before, that they needed to understand from somewhere else, because it makes it so much easier for them to open their heart, to be more ready, willing, and able to receive the healing power of love. So it's like a very gentle, soothing, let's say, it's a practice. It's almost like giving someone an anesthetic, an injection when they arrive in the emergency room. The tarot for me is literally like the equivalent of saying, we're pulling the cards, we're doing the reading. And as the process happens, there's a massive sense of decompression of, let's say, the mental energies at the beginning of the reading, and everything turns into love. And then as we go through, all the barriers are dissolved between myself and the client, where it's all about, what's actually going on as opposed to like the mental processes of what we think is going on. And so that's literally like coming into an emergency room and like being treated immediately, and then when everything's calmed down, then we go into the real work. And the real work is what is the story that's told from the cards that triggers the story that needs to be, let's say, addressed inside the client themselves. So I'm literally just a facilitator, helping them to open their own heart. Because if their heart is not open, there's nothing I can do. And they would not come to Tarot Lumination unless they had an intention to open their heart, at least a tiny bit. Right. And all I need is a tiny crack. Right. As long as I can get in there and they're willing and they've gone through the process, then we're good. And I can work. Most of the clients that come to my little channel for private readings, I mean, I love doing all the public stuff, but I like doing the private readings too. And most of the private ones are people who've endured a lot of some really ugly stuff by most people's reckonings, and it's very traumatic. And because I'm so fluent in those subjects, none of it phases me. I mean, you can't. There's nothing you can tell me that will scare me about these things, and so it makes it very easy for me to relate to them, so long as they're willing to trust me just a tiny bit, just to get the door open. And then after that, it's all. From there on, it's their willingness to receive the love.
Is there anything that you're finding these days that seems to be almost like a theme with your clients? Or is there a certain thing you always seem to be dealing with? Or because I've noticed that it is pretty much the same theme for most people that I see or that I work with.
No, I don't have that, to be honest. The subject matters that come to my attention in the readings are all over the place. Mm-hmm. All over the place. It could be children, money, health, relationship, loss of a loved one. It could be financial. It could be career. Things like that. Spiritual. A lot of it is very spiritual. A lot of the people come in with very, very complex issues regarding their spiritual evolution. And one thing that you did mention there, like the subject you mentioned of a constant theme, there is a constant theme on this side of the desk, so to speak, for tarot illumination.
Gotcha. Yes.
What I'm noticing more and more is that there's a vast array of clients that the core theme always comes down to love and healing, understanding that it's all about, well, essentially, tarot illumination is functioning as, what was the word you used earlier? Conduit for the healing power of love. Okay, so literally, my job is to be an embodiment of a conduit. In other words, I'm perceived as a tarot reader who offers readings that open the heart up to healing for the other person. So that's the perception from their side. And from my side, the perception is much more of my feeling of being a funnel, like a faucet or a funnel, or like a valve where my physical body is surrounded by angels, and the upper part of my body is connected very much to what I call heaven, or the energy of heaven. And then as the reading starts to progress and we cross a certain threshold, then the flow begins. And what happens is the energy field moves through my physical body, through what you would call the digital media, and directly into the client, through voice and hands and conversation or whatever. But it's more than that, because it's the actual, like the physical medium itself. In other words, their computers or their smartphones or their laptops or their whatever devices we are working on. Those are the mechanical conduits. But what's happening is the energy is moving through, more or less like what they would call energy healing, like professional, very, very highly advanced Reiki healers, or people who are super advanced remote energy healers who've been through some of the pranic healing programs or something like that, where you're moving energy. You're literally moving energy. You can't touch it, but it goes where it needs to go, which is kind of one of the Reiki themes. And that's really all I'm doing. I'm literally functioning as a surgical tool.
Right.
Where I can focus the energy either on a broad, gentle swab, or we can go into laser-like focus and channel the energy in those kind of ways. And it's a very, very benevolent process. I allow myself to be guided. Right. And I put myself in a condition of neutrality where the clients can guide me as well, so we reach a happy medium. And when it works really well, there's no sense of self at all. I'm literally in a state of just joy. I'm in a state of joy where the energy is flowing in the way it has to flow, and the recipient is receiving in the way they have to receive. And it becomes very, very evident, especially towards the end of the reading, if they have a breakdown and they're crying and they're happy and they're sad and it's all come out, which just like you would experience if you went in a deep therapy session and you talked about something horrible and you finally got it out of your system. It's like pulling out a big sliver, like if you're a little baby and you had a sliver. It's the same thing. We are relieving pressure, relieving tension, and we're applying the healing power of love as a soothing balm, as like an ointment. It's just like an ointment.
It's interesting because as you're talking, they're showing me a corresponding vision. And when you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, I think I asked you a question, and I don't know what we were talking about, but my guide said that what you actually do, what TL does, is you create an environment where people feel not okay, but they feel confident that you create an environment for people to believe. And I thought the way it was said, it was beautiful, because what he's showing me, so this is their interpretation of what you're telling me as a visual. They're showing me kind of standing behind you. So you're the vehicle. They're projecting the energy of love through to you. But in order for the client to receive it, you have to crack them open. And you do that by tapping into their stuff that you would not have been aware of otherwise. And that allows them to go, ping. It is almost like it cracks the shell. And when the shell cracks, so your job is to kind of mitigate the energy channel. So once they crack, because now you've told them things that they didn't tell you, and you've talked to them about stuff they've gone through, all of a sudden there is the belief right there. And it's almost like that crack creates this openness for the energy that goes right through. That's the visual I had.
Oh my gosh, Joanna, you've really touched on something, because it's exactly what we were discussing with one of the relationships here through Tarot Illumination, literally about the cracking of an egg. And it's a very, 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 let's say, delicate process, because it's all about the credibility.
It's like a procedure.
It is a procedure. It's like very advanced surgery, and you have to be very, very, very careful. And they have to. The client has to believe that it's possible to be healed.
Yes.
And then they have to believe because they've already done something outrageous by, stepping outside traditional medicine and then coming to somewhere like Tarot Illumination. That's a big enough leap. And so when they get there, they have to believe, this is ludicrous. This is bizarre. I'm talking to some person with a bunch of wavy hands through a YouTube channel, and they're flipping cards, and this is really weird. I better not tell anybody about my friends or family about this stuff, because they'll think I'm weird, but we're going to do it anyway. So it gets a bit like that sometimes.
Yes.
But not always, but typically, like you said, it's about the belief. They have to believe it's possible.
Yeah.
And I think that the tarot itself and the medium through which Tarot Illumination is working gives the client that perception that, wow, this really is possible. And so it's almost like, when you go to like an amusement park or something, there's one of those optical illusion mirrors or something, and it's very disorienting. And you start to walk up to it and you try to press it to see what's happening. Like, what is this? And you touch it and you realize, oh man, this is weird. But it feels good. And so you decide, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to walk through this thing. It's like walking through a veil. And then you go on the other side and you realize, wow, it's not that scary.
Right.
It's just, what was I worried about? And all of a sudden there's the sense of, it's just like, oh, it's actually okay. So there's a sense of, they have to feel safe.
Yes. First and foremost. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I'm looking at the clock, and can you believe we're literally like 12 minutes before it's done. So I really want to make sure that we talk about this. I know time flies when you're having fun. You're also an author. And you briefly mentioned when clients come into you, and they often come with financial stuff, you are already a published author, and I believe the second one is in a process of being published, or in a process of writing script. Is that what it is?
Correct.
So your first book is about money. Can you just very, very briefly tell us what it is? Because you've told me some stuff that I said, I got to get the book, because my understanding is you got some predictions from Spirit about finances, didn't you?
This was long ago. This was just even around 2008, 2009, I saw the writing on the wall, and I don't know. But anyway, I got to the point where around 2014, 13, 14, I knew. And so I thought, this is freaking me out. I better check the astrology. And so I started digging through the astrology, and I discovered this massive vortex in terms of the astrological alignments, which are now starting to become quite well spoken on the internet. And it's basically the focal point is January 2020. And so I decided, okay, I've got to work on this. And so I drafted a book called Wealth, Money, Finance, and you can get it on Amazon. And it's about the understanding of, like, money is what we believe it is.
Yes.
And the world of money is going to be transforming radically over the next few years. Specifically, there's going to be a crescendo, a real threshold moment astrologically around January 2020. And what I'm trying to do with the book is wake people up. Wake up, people. Please understand, currency is not money. Money is something that holds value. Currency is a token that represents value. And the currencies are being manipulated beyond ultimate distortion to the point where everything is ultimately going to fall apart, and a new form of understanding of money will emerge. It's inevitable, and it's already starting to happen.
It almost feels like that has to be the only way to go.
It is. There is no
There's
escape.
no other, right.
You know, if you understand, I did a lot of history and studying about the history of money itself, and it's very much in the book. It's like a storybook. And I'm not like a preacher trying to tell people like how to cure your finances or how to recover from college debt. It's not like that at all. I'm trying to give people a gentle awakening that there is some very serious stuff happening right now in global finance, currency markets, and banking, and it's going to affect everybody on the planet, primarily triggered through the United States Federal Reserve, because there's a very close alignment between the date of January 2020 and the date of 1776, which was also a very pivotal year in United States history. And it's very deeply linked to the U.S. Federal Reserve banking system. So that's it. That's what the little book is about. And it's basically a heads up. Wake up.
Do we have hope? Do we have hope?
Oh, yeah. I guarantee there will be a solution, and people are already working on it. But
everybody
it's very,
get the book.
Yeah, please, yeah, everybody get the book, yeah.
Get the book. Now, the other book, and I'm looking at the clock here, and I also want to talk about your silk scarf. So you have a giveaway of a silk scarf. Yes. Tell us, what is this about?
Well, I like to be artistic. I'm not exactly, a Rembrandt, but I like making art, and I love silk scarves. It's like a weird little fetish I have. And so I decided, we're just going to do this. And I did it. And I thought, whoa, this is freaky cool. We need to, brand this. And so I created a little raffle. And you can buy the tickets if you go to the YouTube channel. Actually, I just put up a promotional video today, for people who are interested in getting the raffle tickets to win the scarf. And whoever wins the scarf also gets a free full complex private reading.
Wow.
Yep.
Oh my God, I'm looking at the scarf that's on your side, and I'm looking at the number. It makes me chuckle because I see it all the time. I bet you got that number from somebody upstairs.
Yeah.
Very, very cute. Very good. So everybody should go to your YouTube channel, Tarot Lumination, and also tarotlumination.com for a chance to win. Now, your second book, which is Healing Through Love.
The title is Love and Healing.
Love and Healing.
A little book about the healing power of love.
And that is in a process of being published?
Yeah, basically the manuscript is written now, and it needs, let's just say, I would say another few weeks, couple months of revisions and tidying up, and then it's going to be published. Correct.
So they're telling me March about this book. So I don't know, but you better get on it.
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to get to get a written piece up to readable quality for a mass audience.
So if you were to sum up what this book is about, aside from the title, what would you say the book is about?
It's about how the healing power of love is an actual phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
It's an understanding that love is as love does. And what I did was I chose my most recent life and death situation that I had to endure. And I thought, I'll just turn that into a story and a storybook, and that will be the lead-in to what the book is really about. It's all about... once the book comes out, they will understand, here's just another example of trauma that was endured by Tarot Lumination and millions of other people. And because everybody endures trauma to some degree at some point in their lives, it should hopefully be easy enough for people to relate where they kind of go, oh, I get it now. But it becomes understandable because I introduce the concepts of love and healing in a way that makes sense from the celestial perspective. So it doesn't sound like I'm like a preachy, how to contact your angels and induce an angelic healing, or 3 steps to, it's not like that at all. It's a storybook. It's like a storybook. And
but it's based on your story. It's based on your story.
It's
wow. Okay.
It's
fantastic.
The sort of subject matter that you were trying to get me to talk about live on the radio. Yeah. I'm too squeamish.
I get it. I totally get it. Listen, I totally get it. And I think that's why they said to you, you need to do that. But anyway, that's between you and I. I'm looking at your scarf here, and I'm hearing that you did this scarf, right? You made this.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They're saying to me, this was equivalent to therapy.
Oh yeah, very, very much
so.
I really needed to do that because I was really wigging out at the time. I was, I was already dealing with quite a lot of trauma. This is secondary trauma, nothing to do with what was written in the book. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times there's nowhere else for me to go because I don't really go to Tarot Lumination people. I'm my own Tarot Lumination. And so it gets a bit lonely in my world in that regard. And what I do is I turn to art or music or writing as my own personal form of tangible self-healing. I do a lot of private personal self-healing practices here at home. Right. They're unconventional, but it never stops. It never stops with me personally. I'm always moving from one form of self-healing to another because I have to. So,
well, how else would you know what it means to heal through love if you didn't do it yourself? You have to do it yourself first.
Yeah, I have to practice it on myself because otherwise I would have been dead long ago. I've encountered death so many times, and I've had to come out of it with doctors saying, "I don't know how you did that,"
No.
But anyway.
So it's a story of hope. It's a story of hope, really.
It's very, very much a story of hope. So people can realize that it is possible to heal yourself. Certain physical things, like if you've lost if you've lost an arm, for example, or through an amputation, it's hard to, do something like that. Maybe we can talk about prosthetics and stuff, and I've talked to doctors about those things. But in general, I work with people who are suffering deep, deep trauma at the soul and heart level, and giving them a realization that there is hope for love and healing in their life, in their world, but probably in ways that they never understood could even exist before. But it is there, and it's available. Because
who teaches us that? Nobody. At least not in my generation.
Nobody.
I think the younger generation, as I'm looking at the younger generation, those who are younger than me, say, 10, 20 years, they're starting to be much more aware of their inner selves, where I think our generations and the ones before us were much more cerebral, right? That was the focus.
Yeah.
I can't wait for your book, and I'm asking on air, so you can't say no. I would like to have a copy that is autographed.
Okay, you got it.
And then we can talk about it on air when you're ready.
Well, that's exciting. I never thought. Oh, yes, absolutely.
There you go.
Fantastic.
What would surprise people about you?
That I look absolutely ordinary. You'd never know that I was Tarot Lumination by looking at me.
Oh my God,
that's about it. I mean, it's.
what is the, and this is within the confines of what you can say, what is the strangest thing that you have experienced?
I would say out-of-body experiences where I have vivid photographic exact recollections and provable stories to confirm the fifth and seventh dimensions and the world behind the veil, so to speak. Yeah.
When you were talking earlier about, I got chills all over me because when you were talking earlier, I heard you didn't say it, but I heard it, that having gone through all the things that you've gone through and endured, you actually had to resort to separate from your body on many occasions.
Yes.
And that's the survival. So you've had a conscious out-of-body experiences, which I am fascinated by, but I only had one and a half so far, and they were very, very short.
Oh, okay.
What's that like? I mean, I understand some people naturally, spontaneously separate. Some people separate due to extreme trauma and conditions, and some do it through learning, like what I'm trying to do. Oh. What's it like when you leave your body and you look at yourself and you go, "Oh, okay, that's interesting."
It's like watching a movie of yourself. It's like watching a movie. It's literally just like you just blink and all of a sudden you're like in a whole other world, and you're still aware that you're you, but you're also aware that you've basically become disembodied, and you are in a very sort of like I'm not going to say a blissful state, because sometimes it can be very frightening to be in those situations, and so I'm not suggesting it's something I would run into, if I was eager to explore, but it is there. It does exist. And
I mean, I have had a couple of similar experiences, not through leaving my body, but just through extreme meditation and becoming a pure consciousness. And it lasted very few moments, but I remember at that moment, I was aware of my body, but I was also aware that I was not a body. Like it's hard to explain. I felt like I was everywhere. But what I remember is at that moment, everything became so crystal clear, including the fact that everything I have choice over everything.
Oh,
it was just that awareness. And then it was gone. I thought, oh my God. And now I understand why, we all talk about choices, because once you remove the brain, which is our filter, you truly then understand what that means.
Yeah, I get to the point where it's all about the decisions. It's decisions. Wow.
Okay, we're out of time. Thank you so much, and I hope you come back. I want to mention your website again, tarotlumination.com. Your channel, YouTube channel again. TL, what is it?
Tarot Lumination. It's literally just like TAROTLUMINATION. Very simple.
And go on to Amazon to get the book. What's the title of the book again?
Wealth, Money, Finance.
You guys, if you want to know about money, you want to get the book, it's information that TL got from outside sources, if you know what I mean. And I'm looking forward to reading the one that's coming in the next few months. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you all of you for listening. This podcast will be posted on my YouTube channel and on TL's YouTube channel eventually. So thank you so much, and happy holidays, everyone. Merry Christmas, and talk to you soon. Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Joanna.